The oven was burning. Hai stood at the broken window of the grand observatory and watched the sky turn red with fire. Her people had lived on this world for 8,000 years. They had built cities of crystal and light. They had created art and music that other species traveled across the galaxy to witness. They had never known war because they had never needed to know it. Now war had found them anyway. The Eth invasion had begun 3 weeks ago without warning. Their ships had appeared in orbit like a swarm of angry insects and immediately started bombing the surface. They had no weapons to fight back. They had no soldiers to defend their cities. Their bodies were fragile things built for a gentle world with low gravity and thin air. They were scholars and dreamers, not warriors. Watched another explosion bloom on the horizon. That was the city of 2 million people had lived there yesterday. She did not know how many were still alive now. Her aide entered the room with his 4 slender arms wrapped around himself in the gesture of despair. His pale skin flickered with the blue light of grief. All could produce light from their bodies to show their emotions. It was beautiful in times of joy. In times of sorrow, it made their pain visible to everyone around them. Said, his voice barely a whisper, "The Galactic Council has responded to our request for aid." Turned to face him, what did they say? They have declined to intervene. They claim this is an internal sector dispute and falls outside their authority to act. Felt something cold settle in her chest. She had expected this answer, but hearing it still hurt. The Galactic Council was supposed to protect civilizations like hers. That was the entire purpose of its existence. But when the Eth came with their warships and their hunger for conquest, the Council had looked away. What about the Collective, she asked. They have a defense fleet. They have declared neutrality. They say they cannot risk war with the Eth over a species that offers them no strategic value. They claim our system falls outside their protection zone by 17 light years. They will not extend their borders for us. Closed her eyes. Every door was closing. Every hope was dying. Her people were being slaughtered, and no one in the galaxy cared enough to stop it. She thought of the children in the shelters beneath the cities, huddled together in the dark while the world above them burned. She thought of the elderly who could not run fast enough to escape the Eth ground forces. She thought of the millions already dead and the billions who would follow them. There must be someone, she said, someone who will help us. Hesitated. His lights flickered with uncertainty. There is one possibility, but I do not think you will approve of it. Tell me. The humans. Opened her eyes. The humans. She had heard of them, of course. Everyone in the galaxy had heard of them. They came from a small blue planet at the far edge of explored space, a world so hostile that most species could not survive on its surface for more than a few hours. Earth had gravity 6 times stronger than its atmosphere contained a gas called oxygen that was corrosive to most organic life. Its surface was covered in predators and natural disasters and extremes of temperature that would kill in minutes. The humans had evolved on this nightmare world. They had survived it. They had thrived on it. And that survival had made them into something terrifying. They are said. The Council has classified there as a Class 7 threat environment. Their bodies are built for violence. Their bones are dense as stone. Their muscles can crush our limbs without effort. They have a biological drive called persistence hunting that allows them to chase prey until it collapses from exhaustion. Everything about them is designed for combat and survival. I know what they are, said quietly. Then you know why we cannot ask them for help. Even if they agreed to come, how would we know they would not simply conquer us themselves? We would be trading one set of invaders for another. Walked to the star map that still glowed in the corner of the room. She found Earth easily. It was marked with a red warning symbol that the Council used for dangerous worlds. She stared at it for a long moment. Do you remember the incident at 4? She asked. Blinked his compound eyes. The colony that was attacked by pirates. Yes, The council refused to send help because the colony was too far from their patrol routes. The fleet was occupied elsewhere. For 3 days that colony called for help and no one answered. Then the humans came. Shifted uncomfortably. I remember. They lost 2 ships and 300 of their people breaking the pirate siege. They did not know they had never visited that colony. They had no treaty obligations and no strategic interests in the region. They simply heard that people were dying and they came to help. They bled and died for strangers they had never met. That does not mean they would do the same for us. Turn to face her aid. Perhaps not. But we have no other options. The council has abandoned us. Our neighbors have abandoned us. We can die quietly and let the Eth erase our civilization from history, or we can reach out to the one species that has ever shown they are willing to fight for people who cannot fight for themselves. She walked to the communication console and began entering commands. The signal would be broadcast across every frequency the humans were known to monitor. It would travel through the void at the speed of light, and hope would travel with it. "What will you say to them?" asked. "The truth." Finished entering the commands and paused with her hand over the transmit button. She thought about what she wanted to say. She thought about her people and their fear. She thought about the Eth ships in orbit and the death they rained down without mercy. She thought about the children in the shelters. Then she pressed the button and spoke. "This is High of the People. We are a peaceful civilization. We have no weapons. We have no soldiers. 3 weeks ago the Eth invaded our world and began killing us. We have asked the Galactic Council for help. We have asked our neighbors for help. Everyone has refused. We are dying. Our cities are burning. Our children are hiding in the dark while monsters hunt them. If anyone can hear this message, we beg you, please help us. We cannot save ourselves." The message ended. The signal flew out into the darkness between stars, and on the burning world of they waited to see if anyone would answer. 14 days later, someone did. Deep beneath the mountains of a continent called North America, in a facility called the United Nations Space Command Headquarters, Admiral Henry Brooks read the transmission for the 3rd time. He was an old man with hair and scars on his face from battles fought long ago. He had served in the human fleet for 40 years. He had seen things that would give most people nightmares, but something about this message made his chest feel tight. "How far?" he asked his executive officer. Commander Daniel Carter checked his console. 14 days at maximum burn. They are a non-combat species, Admiral, population of roughly 6 billion. Our intelligence suggests the Eth have killed approximately 200 million of them so far. And the Council is doing nothing. Nothing. They have officially declared it outside their jurisdiction. Brooks stood and walked to the window. Outside, the stars shone cold and distant. Somewhere out there, a civilization was dying because no one cared enough to save them. He thought about what it meant to be human. He thought about all the times other species had looked at his people with fear and disgust. They called humans. They called them monsters. They saw the strength in human bodies and assumed it could only be used for destruction. They did not understand. Humans were not strong because they wanted to destroy. They were strong because they had to be. They came from a world that tried to kill them every day. They had survived ice ages and famines and plagues and wars. They had crawled out of the mud and reached for the stars despite everything that tried to stop them. And they had done it by protecting each other. "Mobilize the 3rd Fleet," Brooks said. "All hands on deck. We leave in 6 hours. Carter stared at him. "Admiral, they are not our allies. We have no treaty with them. We have no obligations." "We have an obligation to every living being that asks us for help," Brooks replied. "We have an obligation to be better than the monsters everyone thinks we are. Signal all ships. Tell them we are going to war." The call went out across human space. It reached colonies on Mars and Titan. It reached mining stations in the asteroid belt. It reached generation ships drifting between distant stars. Everywhere it went, humans answered. They did not ask what they would gain. They only asked how they could help. And in the darkness between worlds, a fleet of wolves began to run. 14 days passed like a slow nightmare for the people of A. The Eth continued their methodical destruction of everything they had built. Cities fell one by one. Refugee columns were hunted down on the open roads. The death count climbed higher every hour until the numbers became meaningless. How do you comprehend 100 million dead? How do you grieve for a number that large? Hai had moved her government to an underground bunker beneath the ruins of the capital. She spent her days coordinating evacuation efforts and her nights listening to reports of fresh atrocities. She had stopped sleeping. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the faces of the dead. She had almost given up hope that anyone would answer her message. Then on the 14th day, a signal arrived. Her communications officer said, with lights flashing bright with shock, "We are receiving a transmission from the edge of the system. It is using human military frequencies." Felt her heart stop, put it through. The voice that filled the bunker was deep and calm and carried an authority that seemed to fill the room. "Government, this is Admiral Henry Brooks of the United Earth Space Command 3rd Fleet. We received your distress signal. We are here to help. Please advise on enemy positions and civilian evacuation status." Could not speak. She could not move. For a moment she simply stood there with her lights flickering through every color of the emotional spectrum. Then she found her voice. "Admiral Brooks, you came." "We did. Now tell me where the enemy is so we can get to work." At the edge of the system, the human 3rd Fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. 47 warships emerged from the void like predators waking from sleep. They were not elegant vessels like the ones the Galactic Council built. They were not organic and flowing like Eth ships. They were angular and brutal, covered in thick armor plating and bristling with weapons. They looked like exactly what they were: tools of war built by a species that understood violence on a fundamental level. Admiral Brooks stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Vindicator and studied the tactical display. The Eth fleet hung in orbit around like a crown of thorns. 143 ships of various sizes, from small fighters to massive carriers. They outnumbered his fleet 3-1. He had faced worse odds before. "Sir," Lieutenant Grace Mitchell said from the communications console, "the Eth are hailing us. They are demanding we identify ourselves and withdraw immediately." Brooks smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Open a channel, all frequencies. I want every ship in this system to hear what I am about to say." The channel opened with a soft tone. "Eth forces," Brooks said in a voice that carried across the void. "This is Admiral Henry Brooks of the United Earth Space Command. You have attacked a civilian population that posed no threat to you. You have murdered millions of innocent people. You have committed genocide against a species that could not defend itself." He paused and let the silence stretch. "I am not here to negotiate with you. I am not here to observe your actions and write reports for politicians to ignore. I am here to stop you. You have 30 minutes to withdraw every ship from this system. If a single Eth vessel remains in orbit after that time, I will assume you have chosen to fight." His voice dropped lower. "And I promise you this. My people have been fighting and killing since before we climbed down from the trees. We have waged war against each other for 10,000 years. We have perfected the art of destruction in ways your species cannot imagine. If you want to test us, you are welcome to try, but understand what you are inviting. We come from a world that tried to murder us every single day of our existence. Everything that lives on our planet is designed to kill, including us." He leaned forward. "You have 30 minutes, Brooks out." The channel closed. On the bridge of the Vindicator, the crew exchanged glances. Lieutenant Mitchell looked at the Admiral with wide eyes. "Sir," she said quietly, "they outnumber us 3-1. I noticed. Do you think they will withdraw?" "No, but I wanted to give them the chance. When this is over, I wanted on the record that we offered them a way out and they refused." Commander Carter moved to stand beside the Admiral. "All ships report ready for combat. Weapons charged. Shields at full power. The crew is eager, sir. They know why we are here." "Good." Brooks settled into his command chair and watched the countdown timer on the main display. 29 minutes. 28. The seconds ticked away like heartbeats. On the ETH flagship, Warlord Al watched the human fleet with something approaching amusement. He was a massive creature covered in armored plates, with 4 arms and a head full of clicking mandibles. He had conquered 17 worlds in his career. He had broken civilizations far more advanced than these primitive apes from the galactic fringe. "They are bluffing," he told his officers. "They would not have traveled this far just to turn around and leave. They want to negotiate. They want concessions." His tactician was less certain. "Warlord, our intelligence on the humans is limited, but what we do know suggests they are not a species that makes empty threats. They have fought wars against each other for their entire history. They evolved on a world where violence was necessary for survival. And that makes them dangerous to us." Clicked his mandibles in laughter. "We have crushed species that were far more advanced. These humans have been spacefaring for barely a century. Their technology is inferior to ours. Their numbers are small. They are nothing." The 30 minutes passed. Admiral Brooks watched the timer reach 0. The ETH fleet had not moved. If anything, they had spread out into a more aggressive formation. "Well," he said, "I gave them a chance." He stood and addressed his crew. "All hands, this is the Admiral. We are about to engage a hostile force that has spent the last 3 weeks murdering civilians. Our mission is simple. We are going to break their fleet, and we are going to save as many lives as possible. I will not lie to you. This will be hard. Some of us will not make it home. But what we do here today matters. There are 6 billion people on that planet counting on us to be exactly what the galaxy thinks we are. Let us show them what can do when they fight for something that matters." He turned to Carter. "All ships engage." The human fleet surged forward like a pack of wolves. They did not maintain the careful formations that other species used. They did not exchange precise calculated volleys from safe distances. They broke apart and swarmed, each ship picking a target and closing the distance with reckless aggression. The ETH were not prepared for this. They were used to enemies who fought cautiously, who valued self-preservation, who would retreat when the odds turned against them. The humans did none of these things. They charged straight into the heart of the enemy formation and started killing. Captain Samuel Price commanded the cruiser Relentless. His ship was not the biggest in the fleet, and it was not the most heavily armed. But Price had been fighting since he was 18 years old. He knew how to hurt things. "All batteries fire at will," he ordered. "Helm, get us in close. I want to see the whites of their eyes." The Relentless plunged into a formation of ETH destroyers and opened fire with everything it had. Plasma bolts and missiles streaked through the void. Enemy ships exploded in blooms of fire and debris. The Relentless took hits in return. Armor plating buckled. Hull breaches opened on the lower decks. Alarms screamed through the corridors. Price ignored all of it. "Keep firing," he said. "Find me another target." Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human ships absorbed damage that would have destroyed vessels from any other species. Their crews fought through injuries that would have incapacitated weaker beings. They did not retreat. They did not surrender. They simply kept coming, kept fighting, kept killing until the job was done. Warlord Al watched his tactical display with growing disbelief. His ships were dying. His formations were breaking apart. The humans were tearing through his fleet like it was made of paper. "This is impossible," he whispered. But it was not impossible. It was simply what happened when you gave something worth fighting for. The battle in orbit raged for hours. Human ships and ETH vessels clashed in a dance of fire and death that lit up the darkness between stars. But Admiral Brooks knew that winning the space battle was only half the mission. There were still millions of trapped on the surface, hunted by ground forces that had been slaughtering them for weeks. He opened a channel to the marine transport ships that had been hanging back from the main engagement. All ground teams, you are clear to begin surface operations. Priority 1 is civilian evacuation. Find the survivors and get them to safety. We will handle the fleet. On board the transport ship Valiant, Dr. Wells checked her medical kit one last time. She was the chief medical officer for the ground teams, a woman in her 40s with steady hands and calm eyes that had seen more battlefield injuries than she could count. Around her, Marines were strapping on armor and checking weapons. Lieutenant Morgan was leading her escort squad. He was young, maybe 25, with broad shoulders and the kind of quiet confidence that came from knowing exactly what he was capable of. He caught her looking at him and nodded. "We will keep you safe, Doc. You just worry about the wounded." "I always do." The transport ships dropped through the atmosphere like falling stars. Below them, the surface of it was a patchwork of destruction. Cities that had once glowed with the gentle light of architecture were now dark and broken. Fires burned in the ruins. Columns of smoke rose toward the sky like the fingers of ghosts reaching for heaven. Wells felt her stomach tighten. She had seen war zones before. She had treated soldiers wounded in conflicts across human space. But this was different. This was not a war between armies. This was a slaughter of innocents. The Valiant set down on the outskirts of a city called. According to intelligence reports, there was a refugee shelter somewhere in the ruins that had been cut off by ground forces. Thousands of civilians were trapped inside with no way to escape. Morgan gathered his squad at the transport ramp. 10 Marines in full combat armor, each one carrying enough firepower to level a building. They looked terrifying, Wells thought, like demons made of metal and muscle. "Listen up," Morgan said. "Our job is to reach that shelter and evacuate the civilians inside. The have ground forces in the area. We will probably have to fight our way through. Rules of engagement are simple. Kill anything that tries to stop us and protect the dock at all costs. She is the one who is going to keep those people alive long enough to get them out." He looked at each of his Marines in turn. "One more thing. These have never seen humans before. They have heard stories about us. They think we are monsters. When we reach that shelter, I need everyone to stay calm and keep your weapons pointed away from the civilians. We are here to save them, not scare them to death. Understood?" "Yes, sir," the squad responded in unison. They moved out into the ruined city. The streets were choked with debris and the bodies of the dead. Wells tried not to look too closely at the corpses they passed. They were so fragile, she thought, so delicate. Their bones looked like they would shatter if you gripped them too hard. How had they survived on any world, even a gentle one? "Contact ahead," one of the Marines reported. Patrol, looks like 6 of them." Morgan did not hesitate. "Take them out, quiet if possible." The squad moved like shadows. 3 Marines broke off and flanked the patrol while the others provided cover. There was a brief flurry of movement, a few muffled sounds, and then silence. The patrol was down. They had never even seen the humans coming. The squad pushed deeper into the city. They encountered 2 more patrols and eliminated both without taking any casualties. The were not expecting resistance. They had grown used to hunting civilians who could not fight back. They did not know how to handle predators who were better at killing than they were. Finally, they reached the shelter. It was a large building that had once been some kind of community center. The doors were sealed and the windows were dark. Morgan approached carefully and knocked on the main entrance. "Hello in there," he called out. "We are human soldiers. We are here to help you. Please open the door." Silence, then a trembling voice from inside. "How do we know you are telling the truth? How do we know you will not hurt us?" Morgan sighed. He looked at Wells, then at his squad. "You do not know," he admitted. "You have heard stories about us. You have heard that we are monsters from a death world. Maybe some of those stories are true, but right now there are ETH soldiers heading this way. If you stay in there, they will find you and they will kill you. If you come with us, we will protect you. That is the only promise I can make." More silence, then slowly the door opened. Wells would never forget what she saw inside. Hundreds were packed into the building. Old and young, families huddled together, children clinging to their parents. Their skin was flickering with the pale light of terror. They looked at the humans with wide, compound eyes full of fear. Morgan took off his helmet. He handed his rifle to another Marine. Then he walked slowly into the building with his hands open and visible. A young child was standing near the front of the crowd. She could not have been more than 5 or 6 years old by human standards. Her lights were flickering white with fear, and her small body was shaking. Morgan knelt down in front of her. He moved slowly, carefully, making himself as small and unthreatening as possible, which was difficult, given that he was twice the size of any adult in the room. "Hey there," he said softly, "what is your name?" The child stared at him. "Kirin." "Hi Kirin, I know I look scary. I know you have heard bad things about my people, but I promise you I am not going to hurt you. I am here to help. We all are." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wrapped candy. He always carried them on missions. He never knew when he might need to calm a frightened child. "Do you like sweet things?" he asked. "This is from my planet. It is called chocolate. Would you like to try it?" Kirin looked at the candy, then at Morgan, then back at the candy. Slowly, carefully, she reached out and took it. She unwrapped it with trembling hands and put it in her mouth. Her lights shifted from white to a surprised orange. "It is good," she whispered. Morgan smiled. "I am glad you like it. Now, Kirin, can you help me with something? I need to talk to the adults here. I need to tell them that we are going to take everyone somewhere safe. But they are scared of me just like you were. Do you think you could tell them that I am okay? That I am not a monster?" Kirin looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned to the crowd of terrified and spoke in her small, clear voice. "He is nice. He gave me chocolate. I do not think he is going to hurt us." It was such a simple thing. A child's trust, earned with kindness and candy. But it changed everything. The fear in the room began to fade. They started to move forward, started to listen as Wells and the Marines explained the evacuation plan. Outside, the sounds of battle echoed through the ruined city. ETH forces were closing in, drawn by reports of human activity. Morgan put his helmet back on and raised his rifle. "Doc," he said to Wells, "get them ready to move. We will hold the perimeter." The Marines took up positions around the shelter. When the ETH arrived, they were met with a wall of human firepower that stopped them cold. Marines who had been gentle and patient with frightened civilians became something else entirely when they faced the enemy. They became what evolution had made them: predators, killers. Sergeant Lane took 3 plasma bolts to her armor while shielding a group of children during the evacuation. She killed 9 ETH soldiers before her could reach her. When Wells tried to examine her wounds, Lane pushed her away. "I am fine," she growled. "There are civilians who need help more than I do." And that, Wells thought, was the thing the galaxy did not understand about humans. They were not monsters because they were strong. They were strong because they chose to be. They had evolved the ability to kill because their world demanded it. But they had also evolved the ability to love, to protect, to sacrifice themselves for others. They had called them. Today, they were learning that could also be angels. The battle for lasted 4 days. 4 days of constant fighting in orbit and on the ground. 4 days of human ships trading fire with ETH vessels, while Marines fought through ruined cities to rescue civilians. 4 days of blood and fire and death that would be remembered for generations. By the end of the 4th day, the ETH fleet had been reduced to a fraction of its original strength. Over 200 enemy ships had been destroyed or disabled. The survivors had pulled back into a tight defensive formation around the warlord's flagship, a massive carrier that dwarfed every other vessel in the system. On the bridge of the Vindicator, Admiral Brooks studied the tactical display with tired eyes. He had not slept since the battle began. His officers had begged him to rest, but he refused. Not while his people were still fighting. Not while there were still civilians to save. Commander Carter approached with a data pad in his hand. Latest reports from the surface, sir. Ground teams have evacuated approximately 3 million civilians to safe zones. Ground forces have been pushed back from most major population centers. Lieutenant Morgan's team alone has rescued over 12,000 people. Brooks nodded. And our losses? 11 ships destroyed, 8 more with heavy damage. Ground casualties are at 237 dead, another 400 wounded. The numbers hit Brooks like a physical blow. Each one of those dead was someone with a family, with dreams, with a life that had been cut short. He had sent them here. He had asked them to fight and die for strangers. They knew what they were signing up for, Carter said quietly, reading his expression. Every single one of them volunteered. They knew the risks and they came anyway. That does not make it easier. No, sir, it does not. Brooks turned back to the tactical display. The flagship hung in the center of his screen like a wounded beast surrounded by its last defenders. It was time to end this. Signal all ships, he said. Full assault on the enemy flagship. I want every gun we have pointed at that carrier. We take it down, we break their spine. The human fleet moved like a single organism. 23 warships converged on the formation from multiple angles, pouring fire into the defending vessels. One by one, the defenders fell. Their shields collapsed under the relentless barrage. Their hulls cracked and broke. Their crews died in the cold dark of space. Captain Price and the Relentless led the charge. His ship had taken terrible damage over the past 4 days. Entire decks had been destroyed. Half his weapons were offline. But the Relentless was still fighting, still killing, still refusing to stop. Target their engine section, Price ordered. If we can cripple their drives, they cannot run. The Relentless fired everything it had left at the carrier's engines. Other human ships joined in, concentrating their fire on the same vulnerable point. For a long moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then there was a flash of light and a massive explosion that tore through the carrier's stern. The flagship went dark. Its engines were dead. Its weapons fell silent. It drifted in the void like a corpse, its crew trapped inside a powerless tomb. Brooks opened a channel. Warlord Al, your fleet is destroyed. Your flagship is disabled. You have lost. Surrender now and your surviving crews will be treated as prisoners of war under human military law. Refuse and I will board that ship personally and drag you out in chains. You have 5 minutes to decide. On the crippled flagship, Warlord Al stared at the dark displays and the silent consoles that surrounded him. He could not understand what had happened. His fleet had been invincible. His warriors had been unstoppable. They had crushed civilizations far more powerful than these primitive apes. But the apes had not behaved like any enemy he had ever faced. They had not retreated when they took damage. They had not surrendered when they were outnumbered. They had simply kept coming, kept fighting, kept killing until there was nothing left to fight. Warlord, his second officer said, "What are your orders?" Al looked at the few surviving officers on his bridge. They were waiting for him to say something, to give them a command that would somehow turn this disaster around. But there was nothing he could say. There was nothing he could do. The humans had beaten him. "Signal the fleet," he said finally. "All ships stand down. Lower weapons and shields." The vessels began powering down one by one. On the bridge of the Vindicator, cheers erupted as the crew realized what was happening. The enemy was surrendering. The battle was over. They had won. Brooks did not cheer. He simply leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about the 417 humans who had died in the past 4 days. He thought about the millions of they had saved. He thought about the message that had started all of this, the desperate plea from a dying world. "Please help us." They had answered. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Human ships moved to secure the surviving ETH vessels. Marines boarded the disabled flagship and took Warlord Al into custody. Medical teams rushed to treat the wounded, both human and. Brooks finally allowed himself to be convinced to rest, but only after he had personally visited the medical bay to check on his injured crew. He walked among the beds and spoke to each wounded soldier, thanking them for their service, telling them that their sacrifice had mattered. On the surface of the news of the ETH surrender spread quickly. In the refugee camps and the ruined cities, emerged from hiding for the first time in weeks. They looked up at the sky and saw human ships maintaining a protective orbit above them. They were safe. High requested a meeting with Admiral Brooks. It was arranged for the following day in the ruins of the capital city, the same place where the Grand Observatory had once stood. Brooks arrived with a small honor guard. He was exhausted, his uniform rumpled, dark circles under his eyes. But he stood straight and walked with the steady pace of a man who knew his duty and had done it. Was waiting for him. She was smaller than he had expected, her body fragile and delicate, her skin flickering with soft light. But there was strength in her eyes, the strength of someone who had watched her world burn and refused to give up. "Admiral Brooks," she said, "my people owe you a debt we can never repay. You came when no one else would. You fought and died for strangers. I do not know how to thank you." Brooks was quiet for a moment. He looked at the ruins around them, at the scars of war that marked the once beautiful city. "You do not owe us anything," he said finally. "We did not come here for payment or gratitude. We came because you asked for help and we could give it. That is what we believe, that the strong should protect the weak, that those who can help have a duty to do so." Lights flickered with an emotion Brooks could not identify. "The galaxy calls you," she said. "They say you are monsters from a nightmare planet. They fear you." Maybe they should. Brooks met her eyes. "We are capable of terrible things. Our history is full of violence and cruelty. We have done horrible things to each other over the centuries. But we have also done wonderful things. We have built civilizations and created art and reached for the stars. We are not just our capacity for destruction. We are also our capacity for love and sacrifice and hope." He offered his hand in the human gesture of friendship. "We would like to be your friends, if you will have us." Looked at his hand. She knew what the gesture meant. She had studied human culture in the weeks since she had sent her message into the void. Slowly, carefully, she reached out with one of her slender arms and grasped his hand. His grip was gentle, careful. He could have crushed her bones without effort, but he held her hand as if she were made of glass. "I think," she said with lights shifting to a warm gold, "that we would like that very much." Behind them, the sun was setting over the ruins of but for the first time in weeks, it felt like a sunrise, like the beginning of something new. They had come, and they had brought hope with them. The news of what happened had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within days, every spacefaring civilization had heard the story. They had been dying. The Galactic Council had refused to help, and then the humans had come. 47 ships against 143. They had lost 11 vessels and over 400 soldiers, but they had broken the ETH fleet and saved billions of lives. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session to discuss the human intervention. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall to debate what should be done about these dangerous, who had taken it upon themselves to interfere in galactic affairs. The debate lasted 3 days. Some representatives demanded that humanity be sanctioned for violating treaties and acting without council approval. Others pointed out that the council had refused to act when civilians were being slaughtered. The ambassador stood up and delivered a speech that shocked everyone in the chamber. We called the humans monsters, he said. We looked at their bodies and saw only the potential for violence. We labeled them a death planet and treated them with fear and suspicion. But when our colony at 4 was under attack, when we called for help and no one answered, the humans came. They lost ships. They lost lives. They asked for nothing in return. And now they have done the same thing for the... Perhaps it is time we asked ourselves what kind of monsters risk everything to save strangers. Perhaps it is time we asked ourselves why we were so afraid of them in the first place. The vote to sanction humanity failed by a wide margin. Instead, the Council passed a resolution acknowledging the human contribution to galactic peace and opening formal discussions about a permanent human seat on the Council. It was a small step, but it was a beginning. The rebuilding had already started. Human engineers worked alongside architects to clear rubble and restore essential infrastructure. Medical teams treated the sick and wounded. Supplies flowed in from across human space as ordinary people donated whatever they could spare to help the survivors. Lieutenant Morgan stayed on the planet for 3 months after the battle. He told his commanding officers that he wanted to help with the relief efforts, but the truth was simpler than that. He could not bring himself to leave. Kirin had lost her entire family in the first days of the invasion. Her parents, her siblings, her grandparents, all gone. She had no one left except the other orphans in the refugee camp where she lived. Morgan visited her every day. He brought food and toys and books that had been translated into script. He sat with her when she had nightmares. He held her hand when she cried. The other refugees watched this human soldier with quiet amazement. He was so large, so strong. His body was built for violence and destruction, but with the children he was patient and kind. He moved carefully so he would not frighten them. He spoke softly so he would not overwhelm their sensitive hearing. One evening, an elderly approached Morgan while he was reading a story to a group of orphans. "Why do you do this?" the old one asked. "You could have left weeks ago. Your duty is finished. Why do you stay?" Morgan looked at the children gathered around him. Kirin was leaning against his side, her lights flickering with the soft blue of contentment. "Because they need someone," he said simply. "Because my people have a saying. It takes a village to raise a child. These children lost their villages, so I figure maybe I can be part of a new village for them, just for a little while." The elderly studied him for a long moment. "We called you. We thought you were monsters." Morgan smiled sadly. We have been. Our history is full of terrible things, but we get to choose what kind of people we want to be. Every day, we get to make that choice again. I choose to be the kind of person who helps kids who have nobody else. 6 months after the battle, a memorial was built in the ruins of the capital. It was a simple structure, a wall of polished stone with names carved into its surface. 417 names. Every human soldier who had died defending a world they had never seen before, protecting people they had never met. The dedication ceremony was attended by thousands, and humans stood side by side as High spoke about courage and sacrifice, and the bonds that form between species who choose to stand together against darkness. Morgan was there with Kirin at his side. She was still small, still fragile, but her lights no longer flickered with fear when she looked at humans. She had learned that they were not monsters to be feared. They were friends to be treasured. After the ceremony, Kirin tugged on Morgan's hand. "Do you have to leave now?" He knelt down beside her. "I have to go home for a while. There are things I need to do, people I need to see." "Will you come back?" Morgan felt something tight in his chest. He had already submitted the paperwork to request a permanent posting on I. He had already started learning the language. He had already decided that this small, broken world had become his home. "I will come back," he said, "I promise. And when I do, I am going to stay for a long time, if that is okay with you." Kirin threw her arms around his neck. She was so light he barely felt her weight, but he felt the warmth of her embrace and the gentle pulse of her lights against his skin. "It is okay with me," she whispered. Admiral Brooks returned to Earth as a hero, though he refused all attempts to celebrate him. When reporters asked about the battle, he spoke only about the soldiers under his command. He talked about their bravery and their sacrifice. He talked about the medics who worked for days without sleep and the Marines who shielded children with their own bodies. He did not talk about himself. One evening, Commander Carter found him standing alone on the observation deck of the Vindicator, staring out at the stars. "Sir, you should see the latest intelligence reports. The ETH have agreed to a permanent ceasefire. Their warlord is facing trial for war crimes, and 17 different species have requested alliance negotiations with Earth." Brooks nodded slowly. "That is good news." "There is more. The Galactic Council has formally invited humanity to join as a full member. They are offering us a permanent seat." Brooks was silent for a long moment. Then he laughed softly. "You know what is funny, Carter? They spent years calling us. They built walls and passed laws and did everything they could to keep us at arm's length. They were so afraid of what we might do if they let us into their civilization." He turned to face his officer. "And then when they finally saw what we actually do, they realized they had been wrong about us all along. We are not just killers. We are not just survivors. We are protectors. We are the ones who run toward danger when everyone else runs away. That is what evolution made us. That is what we choose to be." He looked back out at the stars, at the vast galaxy that was slowly opening its doors to humanity. "Let them call us. Let them remember what we are capable of, but let them also remember this. When the innocent cry for help, we answer. When the weak face destruction, we stand in the way. When the darkness comes, we are the ones who light the fire. That is who we are. That is who we will always be." Far across the galaxy, on dozens of worlds, a new story was being told. It spread from planet to planet, from species to species, passed down through generations like a precious gift. Once there was a people called the who had never known war, and when war came for them, they sent a single message into the void. "Please help us." And from at the edge of known space, the monsters answered. They came with fire and steel. They fought and bled and died. They held the line when no one else would. The galaxy had called them. They called them heroes. And in time, the rest of the galaxy learned to call them something else. They called them friends.